Hey guys, tonight we drift back through the flickering glow of whale oil lamps to visit the creaky 18th century post houses where even a single folded note felt heavier on your purse than a cannonball on your arm. You can already hear boots scuffing sawdust floors and smell that warm mix of damp parchment, stale ale, and the optimistic horse. You probably won't survive this, at least not without dozing off halfway through the rate tables. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can marvel at who's nodding off where. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open a warped oak door and shuffle into the candlelit lobby of a provincial post house. A yawning clerk, coat half-buttoned, hands you a quill thick with yesterday's ink. The minute you slide your letter onto the counter, the poor fellow lurches, for his brass balance scale distance may be king, but weight is the court jester who keeps adding coins to the tally. Officially, the Post Office Act of 1711 declares all letters must travel at uniform mile-by-mile prices across England and Wales. In reality, each clerk squints at a tattered mileage sheet, pinned beside the hearth, scratches his nose, then quotes a fee that always seems magically rounder than anyone expects. Mainstream fact number one, neatly tucked in by mid-century, a single-sheet letter under 15 miles costs you 3 pence. Beyond 300 miles, it rockets to a whole shilling. Your tired purse whimpers in sympathy. The clerk re-weighs your note, just in case it developed a second dimension, while you blinked. You half joke that he should charge by syllable instead. He half smiles, revealing a heroic gap, where a tooth used to reside, dental plan clearly not included in royal service. His scale pans wobble, like shallow soup dishes, squeaking as if complaining about yet another workday. Historians still argue whether crafty postboys occasionally wedged extra wax under those pans to nudge fees upward, or whether that legend survives, purely because everyone loves blaming teenagers. Behind the desk shelves overflow with bundles bound in red tape, literally red tape, the thin twill ribbon whose modern, metaphorical fame comes from how it once strangled real paperwork. You notice small wooden cubby holes labeled by County Kent, Essex somewhere. North we promise, and the ever-mysterious if lost return to London. Each pocket holds packets, tied with string, their edges soot-streaked from the same hearth that warms the room. Quirky tidbit alert. Some rural postmasters kept tame barn owls perched above these cubbies, not for ambience, but to wage feathered war on envelope-munching mice. Nothing says urgent royal dispatch like claw prints on the address panel. You lean on an ancient counter worn smooth by 2 centuries of elbows and tragedies. A solitary candle puddles wax onto a pewter dish. Its flame sputters each time the door opens to the frosty courtyard where relay horses stamp impatiently. Outside, a stable boy readies the fresh mount that will carry your message to the next post town. The lad pats the animal's flank, muttering reassurances you suspect are also meant for himself. You mentally calculate how many shillings must pass from your pocket to his supper plate, and a grin creeps in when you realize it's roughly the same as he'll earn all week. The economics of empathy can be so inconvenient at bedtime. A second clerk appears, clutching a narrow ledger bound in calfskin. He flips pages, and a practiced blur finds your destination. York, 187 miles by the Great North Road, and plants his thumbnail beside the rate column. 11 pence for the first sheet, he mumbles, plus another 3 pence because the roads are reportedly very bad this season, a euphemism that covers everything from knee-deep mud to highwaymen with trust issues. Joke 1, you consider asking for a good road discount, but you doubt the Crown issues coupons. The clerk asks, whether you'd like to prepay or let the addressee take the pleasure. Both options test friendships, but in 1750 the latter seems almost polite. After all, surprise invoices keep correspondence exciting. Imagine Grandma unsealing a birthday note and receiving a bill for the privilege you think. He nods, slides your silver into a tiny locked drawer, and stamps the folded paper with a crimson handmark, a literal palm dipped in dye and slapped onto the address side. No adhesive stamps, yet just sweaty evidence of human contact. If you ever wanted a stranger's fingerprint on your secrets, the 18th century post office has you covered. In the corner, two journeymen sort packet letters, bound for West Country spa towns. They argue whether Bath or Bristol lies farther from London as the post boy rides. One whips out a pocket mile stick, a wooden ruler hinged like an insect's leg, each segment exactly one stagecoach league. They lay it against a wall map so patched it looks like a poorly quilted blanket. Mile sticks were essential because Britain's 1754 mileage survey hadn't yet trickled into every tavern parlor. Unofficial distances were as elastic as a politician's promise. Joke 2 offered gently, if you could stretch miles the way they did, you'd already be at tomorrow's breakfast. The room's only clock strikes 10 an hour late by its own confession. Timekeeping inside post houses remains famously slippery. After all, why should minute hands hurry when horses refuse to teleport? Yet schedules exist. The York night mail departs at past. You imagine galloping hooves, clattering out of town lanterns bobbing like drunk fireflies. In less than 3 days, provided no floods, mutinies, or goose stampedes intervene, your letter will arrive. Mainstream Fact 2, average speed, for long-distance posts, hovers near 5 miles per hour, slower than a modern jog, but far faster than handing the note to a gossip and praying. You perch on a rough bench while wax drips in meditative rhythm. The clerk finishes his ledger entry, folds a copy into the took-post compartment, and finally looks up, eyes bleary with arithmetic. Anything else, he asks, tone suggesting a nap ranks above further commerce. You ponder sending an invoice for his enthusiasm, but settle for a third joke smile. Only if you offer a buy one, get one discount on sarcasm. His laugh comes out a croak, yet warmth flickers in those weary eyes, proof that even in overcharged post houses, humor finds postage-free passage. With business concluded, you step outside into crisp night air. Lantern halos glow along the coaching yard, painting horses in molten amber. Somewhere a distant church bell tolls, not caring whether its chimes align with official post office time. You glance back at the doorway where faint candlelight still dances. Numbers, maps, and owl feathers blend in your memory like soft watercolor strokes, hazy yet oddly soothing. The road ahead for both horse and dreamer is long but padded with predictable milestones. And as you tuck your hands into coat pockets, coins lighter, mind heavier with curious rates, you feel a quiet thrill. History's bureaucracy may be dull, but it's also the lullaby you never knew you needed. The courtyard lantern dwindles behind you as you slip into the wake of the night, courier boots crunching gravel in imperfect sync with the roan's iron shoes. Wind tugs at the rider's frayed greatcoat, flipping its tails like tired pennants. Yet his spine stays upright, a posture maintained by the fear of fines more than pride. The leather mailbag knocks the cantle with each stride, swollen with invoices, family gossip, overdue rents, and at least one extravagant promise of undying love that will read mortifyingly flowery in daylight. A half-league later, the first relay house huddles behind thorn hedges, squat barnstone, bothy single lantern nailed above a lintel scarred by weather and boredom. A stable lad, eyelids sticky with sleep, swings the gate wide. The instant lamplight touches his boots. The timetable in London already assumes this transfer has begun. The courier dismounts with the grunt legs shaking like bell ropes and hands over a hazel tally stick freshly scored with 2 canted notches. The boy pairs it to its matching half nods and slides the reunited stick into a slot beside the door, low-tech blockchain wood grain edition. While a fresh gelding is led out its flanks, steaming like morning porridge, the courier loosens a walnut shell tied to his belt. He cracks it, removes a disc of sheep wool, no thicker than a coin, and tucks the pad beneath the saddle tree before mounting again. Quirky tidbit. Riders swore these walnut and wool cushions saved their tailbones on broken lanes, an 18th-century prototype of your costly ergonomic office chair. Quiet humor drifts by. The courier's posture owes more to trail mix than to Pilates. Over the doorway, an iron hourglass flips sand, whispering its 12-minute sermon. Each grain is a penny. Let them all fall, and the resulting fine could swallow half a fortnight's wage. The hostler brushes the spent horse counts 8 warm breaths against his palm and declares it fit for oats and sleep. The courier gulps water cut with harsh rum wipes, cracked lips on a sleeve polished by previous journeys, and with a soft cluck urges the fresh gelding forward. The relay house fades behind you like a paragraph you refuse to reread. The lane climbs chalky downs where oak boughs scrape a sky bleached thin by moonlight. The horse settles into a ground-eating trot, 4 beats lantern, sway breath plume repeat until the rhythm seeps into your pulse. The courier hums a crooked bar of greensleeves, maybe to stay awake, maybe to repel highwaymen who demand proper pitch. You imagine a smartwatch counting all this bustle and filing for early retirement, first light joke of the night. A milestone glitters ahead. Numerals catching the moon where crushed oyster shell was hammered into the carving. Historians still argue whether that shimmer was an official safety feature or the whimsy of a surveyor with seaside nostalgia. Quirky tidbit number 2. Smugglers later mined those shells at night, hawking them in London as mermaid pearls, forcing officials to replace the inlays with dull glass that sparked nothing but taxpayer ire. Second joke surfaces leave it to bureaucracy to dim the lights and call it fiscal responsibility. Mist curls from the river valley until the road swims through silver gauze. Timber planks groan beneath the gelding as you cross a narrow bridge lantern. Glow painting nervous crescents on black water. Mainstream fact. Mounted mail averaged about 5 miles per hour on long routes, yet arriving 10 minutes late could cost a rider a full shilling, nearly a week of bread. Somewhere in the future, a food delivery cyclist will hear this and feel instantly underpaid. A tavern squats on the far bank, windows leaking fiddle music and mutton smoke. The courier never slows. Contracts forbid unscheduled stops unless a limb breaks preferably. The horses never the timetables. Your stomach betrays you with an audible growl and a passing sheep looks offended. Imagine explaining to management that you're late because Roast Aromas staged a successful mugging. Heathland stretches beyond the inn gorse bushes, laced with frost, that glitters like powdered glass. Conversation would waste breath, so the road communicates through hoofbeats alone. The mailbag rustles when the horse stumbles, its letters gossiping in paper whispers about who will be opened first. The monotonous rhythm knots itself around your shoulders, heavier than any quilt, yet infinitely more hypnotic. Twin peat-fired braziers appear ahead, glowing like sullen eyes. This larger relay boasts 3 stalls and a painted board listing postage bands nobody can read in the dark. Inside, junior lads argue over a pamphlet describing a new 4-horse mail coach rumored out of Bristol. One predicts ruin for honest writers, another dreams of reclining behind glass instead of collecting dew on eyelashes. The courier ignores the debate signs a fresh tally and swaps mounts with the efficiency of a pit crew long before racing exists. A scrap of conversation follows you out. Talk of gentlemen in London who want a single penny postage for every letter, no matter the distance. The courier snorts, an equine sound echoed by the horse, then mutters that such folly would flood the kingdom with notes. He rides on, unaware that decades later, Rowland Hill will turn that heresy into policy and revolutionize the system that currently owns his sleep schedule. Under the relay's half-moon, the courier flexes frost-stiff fingers and winces as joints pop like breaking twigs. Mainstream fact number 2. When mail coaches finally debut in 1784, they will slash journey times nearly in half and carry armed guards to scare off bandits. But for now, muscle oats and the faint smell of damp leather still power the empire's broadband. At a lonely crossroads, the courier raises the brass post horn dangling at his hip. He pulls in a breath, hesitates, and decides against the fanfare, sliding the instrument back beneath his cloak. The silence feels like velvet draped over the night. You picture a cottage dweller thanking every saint for the absence of a midnight trumpet proof that mercy can arrive in the form of deliberate laziness. The last stretch of this stage unspools in gentle repetition, hoofbeat, jingle, exhale, sigh until even the jokes curl up and doze. Milestones blur past their oyster shell gleam replaced by glass that flickers once, then vanishes. Somewhere behind our gap-toothed clerk snores over wax-spattered ledgers. Somewhere ahead, the addressee dreams, without knowing your letter, will charge them on arrival. Between those two sleepers, ride horse rider, and you rocked by a rhythm older than steam, steadier than memory, until your eyelids droop, and the world narrows to the soft cadence of iron on stone. Gray light seeps into the world as you and the courier finally clatter into a bustling market town, hooves ringing against cobbles slick with last night's mist. The air smells of oat gruel, wet wool, and faint anxiety. You slide from the saddle joints, creaking louder than the tavern sign overhead, and trail your companion toward the weighing room, a low-roofed annex where brass parchment and human suspicion share cramped quarters. Row upon row of balance scales gleam like over-polished halos waiting to judge every innocent envelope. Inside the atmosphere is half cathedral, half counting house. Candle stubs gutter in metal sconces, casting slow shadows over clerks, hunched like nesting birds behind high desks. One clerk cups a warm mug of chicory brew in both hands, guarding his last dregs from the universe. Another sprinkles talcum powder onto a steel ruler, quirky tidbit. Powder keeps ink from smudging during the frantic folding that turns letters into their own envelopes, a money-saving origami that predates budget airlines by 2 centuries. Your courier unloads the mailbag with a soft groan, spilling bundles onto a trestle table, scarred by decades of quill scratches. A senior weigher, eyes sharp wig askew, summons you forward with the curt flick of a chicken bone pointer. He represents the law that even ink must diet. Here, weight equals destiny. You place your own slim note on the left pan of a scale heart, thudding as if you'd dropped a confession instead of polite commentary about Aunt Mildred's rheumatism. The opposing pan holds tin weights shaped like muffins, each adorned with the royal cipher. They clink together like gossiping coins. The beam hovers indecisive. It sways a fraction, then settles ominously south of level. The clerk's eyebrow arches high enough to shelter sparrows. Appears your single sheet, fancies itself a packet today, he announces. Mainstream fact. Regulations state that anything over half an ounce or more than a single folded folio jumps to the packet rate at least twice the price. You wince, suddenly aware that Aunt Mildred's health update may cost as much as a fancy pudding. You attempt a joke. Perhaps the ink gained weight in the fog, but it splats on the desk like a damp scone. The clerk is immune to pastry humor. He retrieves a slimmer weight, blows dust from its crown, and resets the pans. They tilt again, though less decisively. He peers closer, wig-itching. Somewhere deep inside the scale's fulcrum, a squeak complains possibly on your behalf. You consider holding your breath to reduce atmospheric pressure. Second light joke, but abandon the strategy when lungs protest. To your right, a junior apprentice trims rag paper strips off a stack of outgoing letters. Every snip releases a tiny snowfall of fibers. He claims it's edge, straightening for improved presentation. But historians still argue whether apprentices secretly pocketed trimmings to sell as fire kindling, thereby turning bureaucracy into literal fuel. Given the frost on the window panes, you decide the theory smells plausible, if mildly flammable. Meanwhile, the senior clerk withdraws a palm-sized mirror and sets it beneath the beam. He's searching for drafts that might sway the verdict, a postal superstition rivaling ship captains' concern with albatrosses. You picture him moonlighting as a stage magician. Third joke. Whispers that he'll soon saw the scale in half and double the charges on each piece. But no, he finally nudges one of the tin muffins off the right pan. Balance at last. He harumphs records a lower fee in looping script and stamps the letter with a scarlet numeral 1. Relief trickles through your shoulders like warm cider. Around you, other dramas play out in slow echo. A traveling merchant protests that his triplicate invoices should count as a single document because they share a fold. The clerk counters by dropping a sovereign weight onto the pan-pushing cost higher than the man's hat plume. A widow frets over a tiny parcel of pressed lavender. Scent may be light, but paperboard is heavy, and sentiment never gets a discount. She pays in silver tears and copper coins. At a side bench, a lanky youth taps each envelope against a brass stencil, punched with permissible dimensions. Every clink announces compliance or doom. Quirky tidbit, 2. Some senders cheated these templates by using cross-writing, inscribing sentences perpendicular over the first layer to cram twice the words, an 18th century text message compression. When done neatly, it saved money. When sloppy, it spawned headaches, and on at least one recorded occasion, a marriage proposal mistaken for a tax demand. Above the fray hangs a board chalked with rate tables, numbers fading beneath a veil of soot. You squint, not exceeding 15 miles 3 pence, exceeding 15 but not 30, 4 pence. The increments march ever upward like rent. Next to the chart, someone has doodled a small gallows. A clerk's bleak sense of humor or management's motivational poster, you're unsure. The whole system resembles a board game where everyone loses 1 turn and 2 shillings. The weighing continues. A bundle bound for Edinburgh tips the scale enough to require an extra sheet charge. The sender's only sin was using thicker parchment imported from Holland. Mainstream fact number 2. Dutch paper prized for durability often wrecked budgets. English producers lobbied Parliament to tax the import, hoping patriotism would pay dividends. Ironically, Scottish recipients preferred the smoother Dutch surface for penmanship contests proving economic nationalism is never a tidy ledger. An apprentice arrives wielding a tiny horsehair brush. With feather-light strokes, he sweeps invisible dust from the left pans before each weighing. When you ask why, he whispers that even a flea could mean a farthing. He's joking probably, but you glance at your boots for stowaways just in case. Candle smoke wreathes through sunbeams, leaking from high windows, revealing motes swirling like miniature ballets choreographed by fiscal anxiety. Finally, your letter properly stamped and lightened by clerkly mercy lands in a wicker tray labeled "To York" by Coach. You watch a seal maker press hot wax onto its fold and thump an iron die bearing the royal arms. The scent of resin and scorched linen blooms oddly comforting. Your note joins dozens more, each sporting a unique constellation of scuffs, smudges, and hopes. They will depart tonight under guard nestled in a locked leather mail coach safe, rumored to resist both knives and curiosity. You step outside as church bells strike none too reliable midday. Pigeons scatter from the roof, their wings churning the fog into ghostly spirals. You let out a breath you didn't know you were keeping. Inside, the brass scales keep seesawing meteors of administration, measuring lives in ounces and pence. Perhaps tomorrow the rate tables will change. Perhaps they'll stay forever, glinting under candles, until Roland Hill's penny stamp flattens every muffin weight into irrelevance. For now, though, balance beams remain supreme arbiters of who writes freely and who counts syllables like rationed tea leaves. As you tighten your cloak and prepare to follow the North Road once more, you realize the scales have done more than price your story. They've sanded its edges, trimmed its excess, and left behind a lean tail ready to travel. Your purse feels lighter, but your mind heavier with improbable trivia. And somewhere Aunt Mildred will soon open a letter that costs just enough to make her appreciate every carefully folded word. You duck through a low archway at the rear of the market house and find yourself in a drafty cartography chamber where oak desks shoulder one another like jostling cattle. Candle stubs perch in brass saucers, dripping wax onto a sea of parchment the color of weak tea. Here, mileage is not an abstract rumor, but a snarling beast to be chained with ink and string. Clerks in rumpled waistcoats lean over maps so wide they could blanket a single bed. Each man holds a tiny wheeled measurer, rolling it along wiggling roads while muttering half-remembered prayers that the numbers will come out tidy. A senior surveyor beckons you closer, patting the empty end of his desk as if inviting a stray cat. He smells faintly of coal dust and confidence. With a flourish, he unrolls a fresh chart of England that crackles like a new biscuit. The parchment refuses to lie flat, so he tames its corners beneath 4 convenient brass weights, shaped like oversized buttons, mass-produced, cousins of the muffin weights you escaped earlier. "Right," he says, tapping a quill in time with his heartbeat. "Let's price those leagues before the wax runs out." He traces the Great North Road in vermilion, pausing at every bold milestone mark, 15 miles, 30 miles, 45. Each interval sprouts a tiny notation in the margin 3D, 4D, 5D, ascending like steps on a stairway to bankruptcy. Mainstream fact. The Post Office Acts of 1711 and 1765 codified these mileage bands, insisting that letters be charged by distance traveled in measured segments that rarely match the traveler's sense of justice. You watch as your own route to York accrues fees the way a sticky bun collects stray raisins. The surveyor murmurs, "These bends here, see how the road loops like a drunken eel." That's where the toll-keepers won their argument. Historians still argue whether the loop was engineered to avoid marshland or simply to steer traffic past an influential squire's coaching inn. Either motive cost future correspondents an extra penny per sheet, proving civic engineering and petty capitalism make excellent roommates. Joke 1 bubbles up. You remark that the road appears designed by a man paid per curve. The surveyor snorts, then concedes the accusation is only mostly libelous. On a nearby desk, a junior clerk wrestles with a protractor, large enough to double as a windmill blade. He measures diagonal shortcuts, some coachmen swear exist, then plots them in faint graphite, hopeful ghost roads awaiting parliamentary blessing. Quirky tidbit. Certain provincial postmasters circumvented big city bureaucracy by gluing ribbon to countryside maps in the shape of hypothetical straighter routes, then charging the higher mileage, anyway insisting the ribbon must be shorter than reality because ribbon, unlike roads, does not wiggle. Customers rarely own the cartographic courage to argue. The surveyor takes a strip of knotted twine from his pocket and lays it gently over the map, matching knots to every 10-mile mark. My wife's apron string, he explains with raised brow. Measured precisely if you believe her apron. Joke 2 slips out of your mouth before you can muzzle it. You suggest the apron probably shrinks in the wash, meaning his mileage might fluctuate with laundry day. Laughter ricochets between desks like a rolled coin, brief, bright, and certainly not entered in the ledgers. Across the room, a stout fellow updates the master mileage ledger, a tome so hefty it requires 2 stout fellows to turn a page. He wets a finger flips and reveals columns of spidery numerals. Each entry begins with a town, ends with an exact distance to London, and hides an implied sigh from whichever writer learned that number the painful way. Over his shoulder hangs a small chalkboard, noting rate revision pending. The date next to it is 3 years old. Joke 3, you whisper that perhaps the chalk too is waiting for a rate revision before evaporating. Just then, a messenger bursts in holding a crumpled report from the Scottish Road Survey. He gasps something about 3 newly paved miles near Berwick that shave travel time, yet perversely lengthen the distance when measured with the official serpentine yardstick. The room erupts in low groans, fewer hours, yes, but more miles, therefore higher cost. A young clerk marks the change in red, muttering, "Faster costs dearer, slower costs dearer, at least they're consistent." You sympathize. Progress looks astonishingly like the inside of a purse turning hollow. Your surveyor friend guides you to the largest map on the back wall, an entire continent of vellum pinned beneath oak battens. Tiny parchment flaps hang at county borders. Flip one up, and you reveal alternate toll routes complete with scribbled coin icons. He explains that every flap represents a turnpike trust, lobbying for inclusion in the official postal path, knowing an endorsement will funnel carriages and gate pennies through its turf. This cartographic advent calendar of avarice fascinates you more than any cathedral ceiling. He hands you a quill and invites you to calculate. You follow the crimson road, counting segments, 15, 30, 45 miles. At each band, you jot down the fee, then summon arithmetic to tally the grand total. The numbers march across your scrap like disciplined ants, 3 pence, 4 pence, 5 pence, till you reach York, and the sum bruises your ego. You wonder aloud how many letters an average merchant might send per month. The surveyor shrugs, quotes a figure, and after quick multiplication, you realize a diligent trading partner could pay more postage than rent on a modest cottage. Outside the window, the town crier strolls by, ringing his bell and announcing grain prices. He might as well proclaim, "Hear ye, your correspondence is eating your dinner." You smile at the irony words cost bread, yet bread fuels the words men write, complaining about postage. Some loop, you decide, can never be straightened. The surveyor packs away his maps, rolling them into neat cylinders and slipping them into oilskin tubes. He douses his candle and bids you follow him downstairs to the public reading room. There, merchants pay a farthing to consult miniature mileage tables posted beside the hearth. The tables are printed in tiny type, so a magnifying lens on a brass chain dangles nearby. Patrons jostle, peer curse, then recalculate with grim resignation. One sailor swears he will hand-deliver his next love letter by rowing inland, via canals cheaper if you ignore the risk of drowning. The room laughs, the lens swings. Someone buys another round of watered ale to soothe collective sticker shock. As afternoon light fades, you step back into the alley pockets, rattling with just enough coins to cover the next mileage tier. The oak desk chamber behind you descends into murmured darkness, but its mapped miles keep stretching quiet, elastic lines, tugging at purses across the kingdom. Ahead waits the turnpike gate, its striped pole ready to rise for the price of a horse's sigh and a rider's last tuppence. You tighten your cloak, recall the flutter of parchment under brass weights, and march toward that gate, aware that every footstep adds precisely nothing to your bill until a clerk draws it on a map tomorrow. The turnpike pole slams down behind you, sealing the countryside, like the back cover of a ledger, and almost at once the memory fog of London curls around your thoughts. Coal-reek carriage, screech the clang of 100 iron shop shutters. Suddenly you are striding those cramped capital lanes again, intent on prodding the city's most audacious postal experiment, the penny post. Morning drizzle has already given up and become full-time fog, thick enough that St. Paul's Dome looks like a half-remembered anecdote. You shoulder through a tangle of apprentices and orange girls until, at the corner of Cheapside and Foster Lane, you spot a wooden pillar box no taller than your elbow. The paint peels in satisfying frills, yet the inscription remains legible. Penny Post. Letters received here, every half hour. Inside a bellman's leather satchel waits like an open mouth hungry for gossip. You fish a coin from your pocket, 1 penny squat and unassuming, and drop it into the narrow slot with the theatrical flair of a magician flipping a card. A plump copper clink echoes down the chute. Mainstream fact. Launched in 1680 by seafaring entrepreneur William Dockwra, with backing from merchant Robert Murray, the London Penny Post promised delivery anywhere within a 10-mile radius for a single coin, regardless of distance or weight. For city folk accustomed to mileage gouging, it was nothing short of alchemy. A uniformed bellman lumbers up cloak flapping like a soot-stained sail. He lifts the entire box onto his shoulder and rings a handbell 3 brisk times, ding, 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 warning pedestrians that unsealed secrets are on the move. Quirky tidbit. Each ring sequence indicated a different circuit. 3 chimes told clerks at the central sorting house exactly which wooden box was en route, the 18th century equivalent of a scanned barcode. Joke number 1 pops into your head. Amazon wishes it had this many bells and half as much style. You fall in step behind the bellman boots, squelching through puddles the color of weak porter. Shopkeeps lean out to shout last minute, "Oi posty please," while stuffing receipts between his cloak folds, makeshift inboxes that occasionally resulted in soggy, illegible missives, and one memorable note later auctioned as abstract water art unknown poet. He trudges past the Royal Exchange where stock jobbers haggle so loudly the fog vibrates. One broker waves a script the size of a bed sheet, tries to jam it into the bellman's satchel, and is rebuffed with a grunt, "Penny post letters must be small, sir." Joke 2 whispers that size. Discrimination apparently predates clothing retailers. At Lombard Street, you push through a doorway crowned by a tin owl token of the once private Dockwra office, before the Crown devoured the scheme in 1682, slapping lawsuits faster than seals on hot wax. Historians still argue whether the takeover aimed to maintain postal uniformity or simply to stifle a venture proving too popular for government comfort. Whatever the motive, officials kept Dockra's machinery, but replaced his heart-shaped franc mark with a royal cipher, ensuring every bargain carried an unmistakable whiff of bureaucracy. Inside, clerks sort envelopes into pigeonholes labeled by District Holborn, Westminster, Shoreditch, a few smudged zones where the fog apparently stole the chalk. Letters whiz from hand to slot with the soft, papery sound of moths flitting around a lamp. Overhead, a wooden rail supports 6 canvas zip lines. Bellmen snap leather hooks onto the strings and zip. Packets glide downstairs to couriers waiting with spring-heeled impatience. Quirky tidbit, too. These gravity chutes became so beloved that children begged to ride them, prompting a stern proclamation banning unauthorized juvenile descent. Joke 3. Britain invents ziplining, then immediately outlaws fun parliamentary tradition in a nutshell. You notice how most envelopes bear neat square hand stamps, the hour of posting never the date because penny post aimed for same-day service. Miss the last pickup and your billet due will linger overnight among ledger dust and the lingering aroma of coffee husk ink. One clerk demonstrates the stamping rhythm, thump, swivel, thump, his wrist, a metronome of affordable anticipation. He confides that some Londoners now write shorter, more frivolous notes simply because price no longer penalizes whimsy invitations to tea right now cryptic haikus, even one-line reading merely you up centuries before midnight texts. Yet not everything glides as smoothly as those canvas shoots. Fog delays footpad thefts, and the occasional bellman detour into a tavern all chip at the dream of perfect punctuality. The clerk sighs, recounting last week's escapade when a carrier's satchel was mistaken for a coal sack and nearly shoveled into a furnace. Miraculously, only the letters addressed to Hellfire Club Soho showed scorch marks. Customers declared it thematic and paid anyway. He gestures you through to the loading yard where dowdy fellows strap the day's final bundles onto broad backs. No horses here. London's alleys are too knotty and its stables too pricey. Instead, swift-footed runners weave a web of muscle and memory. Each wears a leather cap fitted with a copper emblem. Your guide jokes they're thinking caps because routes must be memorized, not mapped. Mainstream fact number 2. Contemporary diaries praise penny post carriers for covering up to 10 miles in a single 2-hour round rain, or shine a cardiovascular feat. Modern couriers might respect, if not envy. You decide to test the system? Scribbling a note? Testing speed. Reply, if found upright, you drop it into a fresh pillar box outside the yard and hand the bellman another penny, plus a farthing tip for luck. He raises an eyebrow at your haste, but duty is duty. The bell rings, and off he stomps into the ochre haze. While you wait, you wander up Market, Bond Street, counting shoe buckles and seconds. By the time you finish a window gasping at a silk gown's price tag, a slender girl darts up cheeks, flushed, thrusting a reply, found upright. You cheeky goose. 22 minutes all told. Your grin is wide enough to charge double postage. Still, not everyone applauds the bargain. On Ludgate Hill, you overhear a pamphleteer rage that cheap letters invite moral decay. Too many clandestine rendezvous arranged for a single coin. He foresees scandal sedition, possibly weakened tea. You tip your hat, silently ranking his panic, below your current worry, that Aunt Mildred might adopt the penny post and flood you with thrice daily symptom diaries. Call back laughter. Imagine the weighing room clerk weeping over her relentless half-ounce notes. The fog finally thins at dusk, revealing the Thames like dull pewter. Tower bells toll curfew, and you realize London's penny post circuit will soon sleep its bellmen hanging cloaks to dry beside coke stoves that hiss like tired alley cats. Tomorrow, though, they'll stride out again, ringing commerce awake for the price of a coin small enough to lose between floorboards. You pocket a fresh penny, promising yourself to send a deliberately pointless message, just because you can. Freedom sometimes clinks like copper, not silver. As you drift away down Cannon Street, the flat-rate miracle lingers in your thoughts. Mileage bands, brass scales, and apron-string maps suddenly feel prehistoric compared with this ding-ding-ding democracy of correspondence. Yet you know in a few paragraphs of history, the inland fleece will tighten once more, and distance will reclaim its throne until Rowland Hill sharpens his penny blade anew. For tonight, let the bellmen stride, and the pillar boxes feast. Let Docra's audacity echo past lawsuits and foghorns, tapping gently at the shutters of your imagination, like a friendly courier begging entry before dreams close for the night. You clamber down a slippery gangplank at the London docks boots, squelching on salt-crusted timber while gulls wheel overhead, like unpaid auditors. Ahead looms the Harriet and Hope, a squat packet boat, whose hull is the exact shade of boiled tar and whose deck already vibrates beneath stevedores rolling hogsheads of molasses toward the hold. Somewhere in that sticky darkness, your letter to a cousin in Boston will nestle between rum casks and barrels of salted pork luxury seating, compared with the hay bale that passed for first class on yesterday's coach. A mate waves you aside, wiping brine from his mustache with a sleeve, stiff as parchment, and barking that mailboards last. Revenue, after all, travels before sentiment. The dockside clerk appears with his dreaded rate book dog-eared, rain-spattered, and thicker than a preacher's conscience. He flips to the Outward Colonies page and runs a nicotine-stained finger down tariffs that balloon like yeast in summer heat. Mainstream fact. Under the 1711 Post Office Act, expanded in 1753 for America, a single-sheet letter bound beyond the Atlantic cost a hefty 1 shilling sterling, plus inland mileage on both shores, plus a sea surcharge whenever the Admiralty declared special danger. By contrast, the letter you sent to York now seems a bargain bin trinket. The clerk tilts your envelope against the wind to judge its heft. 1 sheet fine, but distance turns weightless paper into precious cargo. He scribbles a red ones mark, then flourishes a quill so dramatically you half expect confetti. Joke number 1 flutters through your head. If quill flourishing added fees, the crown might retire tomorrow. You cough up the coin, feel your purse wince, and watch him stow the letter in a canvas bag whose faded stencil reads, America and West Indies by God's goodwill and weather. You follow the bag up the gangway, ducking under spars and sidestepping coils of rope that smell of damp biscuits. The first mate beckons you toward a makeshift table, 2 rum barrels bridged by an oar where he inventories each pouch against a freight manifest. Stray drops of rain freckle the parchment, spreading the ink into Rorschach blots that could pass for sea monsters. Quirky tidbit. To keep ink from washing away mid-voyage, some captains lacquered address panels with a thin coat of egg white. The resulting gloss repelled water and attracted rats who mistook it for dessert, introducing postal nibble marks fashionable only in Barbados. Sailors haul canvas sacks below, wedging them between gunpowder kegs, safety protocols clearly optional, and you descend the companionway to steal a final glimpse. Lantern light flickers across a cramped hold where ropes sway like sleepy cobras and shadows mimic breakers on a black shore. Your letter nestles atop the pile, oblivious to the rations of weevil-specked hardtack it may soon fraternize with. The scent is all iron, pitch, and distant pine. Somewhere aft, a bosun curses a knot. The ship answers with a groan that feels disturbingly vertebral. Back on deck sheets, billow as crew unfurl canvas, eager for latitude. The captain, tricorn, cocked at a jaunty 45 degrees, consults a barometer nailed beside the helm. He mutters about low-pressure systems stalking the western approaches like creditors, then scribbles delays probable in a logbook whose margins are already fat with pessimism. You wonder if any addressees ever read those marginal notes. Then remember, they'll pay extra on receipt to share the privilege. Surprise. Here's your overdue love note and an invoice for atmospheric despair. A passenger standing near the rail confides that he's mailing samples of Devonshire lace to Philadelphia, but splits his consignment across 3 separate packets. Insurance is extortion, he whispers, eyes darting like mice. Better to gamble with thirds than lose the lot. You nod, realizing the postal system has made him a statistician by necessity. Historians still argue whether colonial merchants drove transatlantic innovation or whether the Crown's thirst for revenue forced traders into creative arithmetic first. Either way, commerce and math are now engaged in a shotgun wedding officiated by His Majesty's Exchequer. The boatswain's whistle shrieks, hawsers splash free. London's grey spires retreat behind river bends, slick as pewter. Near Gravesend, the sailors perform what they call the frugal blessing, a hurried toss of stale biscuits to the gulls in hopes those feathered accountants will file favorable weather reports. Joke number 2 surfaces you imagine gulls mailing back itemized receipts, charging per crumb consumed. For several days, the Harriet and Hope barrels west, decks awash with spray and occasional sickness. You witness the onboard mail ritual at each noon, citing the purser, opens the canvas sack to air the letters, fanning them gently so damp won't spawn mold. He hums a sea shanty turning envelopes like a sommelier decanting postage. Quirky tidbit 2. Seasoned pursers sometimes sprinkled powdered cloves inside the bag aromatherapy for homesick paper and a mild insect repellent rolled into one. The hold now smells like a bakery haunted by dentists. Halfway across a mid-Atlantic gale, ambushes at 2 a.m. Canvas splits mizzenmast wails, and you cling to the capstan, while waves hurl brine over the quarterdeck. Amid the chaos, the purser guards the mail pouch with saintly focus, lashing it to a beam above the rising bilge. Later, over watery grog, he explains that lost letters equal refund claims, which equal docked wages. I protect my purse by protecting yours, he says, though his wink suggests philosophical modesty. 6 weeks, and 3 meridian-based superstitions, later the coast of Massachusetts appears low and pine-flecked beneath gulls apparently union-hired from the Thames. Boston's harbor smells sharper than London, more tar, less coal, yet the customs house paperwork remains a familiar brand of misery. Inspectors pry into cargo holds, tallying every barrel, counting even the rats if they squeak too loudly. They levitate the mail sack onto a cart slap on an embossed lead seal and roll away toward the Colonial Post Office, where postage dues will multiply like rabbits on rum rations. You trot after the cart down Ann Street past taverns advertising oysters and seditious whispers. At the post office, a clapboard affair painted the regrettable hue of weak mustard, a clerk wearing spectacles, tethered by ribbon lifts. Your cousin's letter frowns at the crimson one's mark, then pivots to a fee chart nailed near the stove. Mainstream fact number 2. Colonial inland rates began at 4 pence for short hops and climbed steeply. Combine that with the transatlantic shilling, and a Bostonian could owe nearly 8 pence just to learn Aunt Mildred's laudanum dosage. No wonder colonists griped that ink was dearer than tea. The clerk scribbles to collect in bold curls across the envelope, dabs sand on the wet ink, and drops it into a pigeonhole labeled Salem and North. Within hours, a rider will gallop north, jingling hardwood stirrups and a head full of local gossip that may or may not compete with your own news. Joke number 3 darts. By imagine the rider reading your letter aloud to passing cows to offset boredom. At least someone would hear it for free. Outside, the salty wind flaps your cloak like a sheet on washing day. You realize the same message cost you $1 to send, and will cost your cousin nearly another to open. Postal inflation, the only thing traveling faster than the packet ship when trade winds behave. Yet even this expensive alchemy links 2 worlds, letting families, merchants, and revolutionaries swap inked whispers across 3,000 miles of temper and tide. You watch Boston's streets stir with evening lanterns, feel Atlantic spray still crusting salt on your eyelashes, and know the next chapter of this postal saga will shuttle coins through yet more toll gates, debates, and improvised miracles. For tonight, though, you pocket an empty purse and a mind overflowing with tariffs, cloves and the reassuring creak of timbers that carried not just goods, but every fragile hope sealed in wax. The ocean hushes, distant bells mark the hour, and your eyelids weigh almost as much as the silver you surrendered back in London. Dawn is only just polishing the puddles on Boston's Fish Street when you set out to learn why every creaking hinge of the mail system seems designed to grab the addressee's purse. Your cousin He, of last week's transatlantic invoice, waits behind his counter, scowling at a fresh envelope, the way a sailor eyes week-old salt pork. Across the front, a clerk has written in uncompromising walnut ink capitals, 1S7D, to collect. He tilts the letter as though coins might drip from its wax, then mutters that affection apparently accrues interest at the same rate as colonial rum. Joke 1 sails in on the morning breeze. You advise him to charge friendship a late fee. Across the 18th century British world, pennies normally travel after parchment, not before. If a note disappears into river mud, the post office forfeits nothing. If it arrives, the recipient must settle mileage weight and whatever seasonal add-on the crown fancies. Mainstream fact. A 1764 parliamentary survey found nearly 70% of inland correspondence reached its destination, postage unpaid, instantly turning doorsteps into cash registers. Historians still argue whether this pay-on-delivery habit encouraged thrifty brevity or merely fermented nationwide resentment toward Westminster's accounting habits. Eager to watch the ritual, you tag along with the district mail carrier. His barrel-chested coat, shiny with candle grease, and his leather satchel jingles each time a coin joins the flock. At every doorway, he raps a holly stick, announces the fee, and waits with the polite menace of a debt collector reciting poetry. A matron leans from an upstairs casement, begs him to read the handwriting first. If it is her Boston brother-in-law, she will refuse delivery on principle. The carrier squints, confirms the villain, and the sash slams like a mousetrap letter returned unpaid. In Black Horse Alley, a shopkeeper insists on weighing his own post-suspicion, dripping like molasses. From beneath the till, he produces a brass balance, no larger than a snuff box, sets the envelope on its tiny pan, and triumphantly declares it lighter than charged. After a bristly duel of raised eyebrows, the carrier knocks tuppence from the bill. You wonder which is heavier, the parchment or their combined distrust. Farther along, you notice curious pen strokes on another missive, tiny dots and dashes masquerading as decorative flourishes. The carrier winks. Lovers and merchants invent secret marking codes so recipients can glean the gist without paying. 2 dots above the town whisper, "All well," single dash forewarns trouble. People scan, nod, then hand the letter back, leaving the post office to lug unpaid gossip home again. Quirky tidbit. An Exeter diary from 1770 records a marriage proposal conducted entirely by coded pen flicks, which ended with the bride-to-be refusing the letter but accepting the groom. Up 3 cramped flights, a weaver coughs up sixpence for a consignment notice. Coins clink from a jar hidden beneath warped floorboards, salted away for famine days. He thanks you for steadying the ladder, sighs that postage hurts most when yarn prices plunge, yet missing a letter could cost next month's orders. Postal economics, you decide, is a choose-your-own-misfortune adventure, second gentle joke delivered with exact change. When no one answers a knock, the carrier scrawls "refused" across the address and drops the corpse into a pouch marked "Dead Return." Back at headquarters that evening, you help sort the derelicts into wooden coffins, pigeonholes crowned with tiny skull and quill carvings. Periodically, a furnace consumes the heap flames, turning ink into drifting sparks. Townsfolk swear they can read half-burnt salutations swirling up the chimney, phantom gossip finally freed from its accounting. Inside, a senior clerk explains that trustees occasionally auction unclaimed letters. Whole bundles invite bids from nosy neighbors hunting cheap secrets. Quirky tidbit 2. At an Norwich sale in 1772, a baker bought a stack of merchant invoices purely to wrap pastries. Villagers spent a week biting through hog future forecasts to reach their cinnamon buns. Insider trading never tasted so sweet, third joke sprinkled liberally with sugar. Even dignitaries feel the sting. On King Street, a judge keeps a footman in permanent queue, clutching a purse of farthings and half-groats, ready for whatever figure today's clerk invents. Over coffee, the judge laments that litigation correspondence devours half his clothing allowance, forcing him to wear last season's wig. You glance upward. Indeed, the judicial halo has wilted into something resembling damp pastry proof that even powdered perukes bow before postage. Night gathers and the day's takings are counted. The carrier spreads coins across a scarred desk, recording every payment refusal and disputed surcharge in twin ledgers, one for money, one for miles, because his wage depends on both. Mainstream fact number 2. Carriers earned a percentage of the dues they collected in addition to a per-mile stipend, so a long road lined with generous households could outshine a short street filled with thrifty hermits. Before parting, you ask whether he prefers sender-paid letters. He shrugs. Coins at the doorstep mean fewer arguments inside, but rumors of an adhesive stamp priced at a penny leave him uneasy. If people stick the fee on front, he says, adjusting his cap, "I'll miss the theater, but not the bruises." His grin mixes nostalgia with relief. Theater seats, after all, rarely come with frostbite. Walking back toward the harbor, you realize any note you dispatch tomorrow might ricochet home, stamped "refused," leaving you lighter of silver and none the wiser. Strangely, the possibility calms rather than alarms. Coins clink, coded dots wink, and dead-letter embers drift across a violet sky. Your eyelids sag. Even pennies feel heavy now. Somewhere behind you, the furnace purrs, turning discarded words into harmless ash, and you understand that sometimes the steepest price of a letter is not the money surrendered, but the quiet dread that it may never be read at all. You leave the clamor of Boston's penny-pinching doorsteps and slip into the hush of a moonlit waterfront warehouse where barrels of tar smell suspiciously less like tar and more like opportunity. Inside, torches sputter against salt-bleached beams, revealing a loose-knit fraternity of sailors. Tailors and enterprising widows bent over greatcoats turned inside out. A seam ripper flickers silver in the firelight. With each careful slice, the lining blooms like a secret pocket universe. Tonight you shadow these night shift artisans as they stitch news numbers and sometimes naked gossip into cuffs and collars, an underground postal service that charges only needle-prick thumbs. Your guide, a wiry smuggler called Threadbare. Tom hands you a square of taffeta, no larger than a playing card. On it curls a miniature ledger itemizing tobacco prices in London's docks, vital intel for colonial merchants who would rather entrust silk to a sleeve than silver to the crown. Tom folds the scrap, slips it between the coat's interlining, and seals the cut with a flourish you last saw a pastry chef use on pie crust. Mainstream fact. Coastal smuggling rings in the 1740s and 50s routinely moved sensitive commercial data and political pamphlets this way, evading both postal fees and royal censors who preferred their sedition bottled and taxed. You help him reef another seam, pricking a fingertip in the process. Joke one bleeds out, you remark that you've officially paid your own blood postage, a discount no clerk will honor. Tom laughs quietly, sound policy when walls may have ears and threads on. Nearby, a widow embroiders what appears to be a floral spray onto a cravat. In reality, each petal is a substitution cipher. She winks, saying that if questioned, she'll claim the pattern depicts King George catching cold. Subversive, yet seasonally correct. When a bundle of finished garments emerges, you and Tom load them into crates labeled innocuously as winter sundries. Cartwheels squeak down cobbles toward a fishing smack awaiting low tide. Beneath layers of tarred canvas lie not only coats, but slim wooden tubes of pressed letters corked and waterproof, ready to be lashed beneath the hull like clandestine barnacles. Quirky tidbit. Smugglers nicknamed these tubes sequills, boasting they could carry 50 folded sheets, yet still float, if knocked loose. Postal innovation meets stylish debris. Low tide arrives with a slurping hiss. Crewmen heave the crates aboard, then haul anchor as gulls object overhead in ringing falsetto. You stand on deck beside a barrel containing false-bottom flasks. Earlier they held brandy. Now they shelter love notes doused in onion juice ink, invisible, until coaxed by candle flame. Joke two surfaces you predict future lovers will misspell. I adore you after discovering their message smells like soup. The smack hugs the coastline, passing watchtowers, whose sentries warm hands over brazier fires, blissfully unaware commerce slides by under their noses like a polite eel. Somewhere beyond the headland, a beach fire signals safe landing. Tom's crew answers with a lantern. Dipped once-twice a maritime wink, and the vessel glides into a secluded cove where shingle crunches under quietly jubilant boots. On shore stands a courier you met in York's weighing room months ago, now moonlighting for quicker profit. He helps lug the crates to a cliffside sheep track. From there, ponies bred for smuggling, low, sturdy, and apparently opinionated, brace under burlap capes. Each cape sports stitched daisies. Every daisy's center hides a wax-sealed chit listing rendezvous codes. Historians still argue whether these decorative flourishes served camouflage or simply soothed nervous riders who preferred their treason to look cheerful. The inland leg begins at dawn. You ride with the convoy through heather and low-mist ponies, stepping carefully over stones that might be revenue agents napping in gullies. One mare snorts whenever her load shifts, sounding uncannily, like the brass scales you escaped back in Boston. You soothe her whispering Aunt Mildred's latest symptom diary joke, 3 clinically proven to bore predators, and the animal settles into an obedient clop. Mid-morning, the smugglers reach a coaching inn that doubles as a post house on weekdays and a plausible alibi on nights like this. The landlord welcomes you through a side door, fussing over tankards while staff hustle the contraband upstairs. Beneath the rafters, coat seams are slit again, letters extracted, sorted, and slid into blank wrappers, bearing fresh wax seals forged from carrots. Wax is pricey, vegetables are plentiful, necessity eats etiquette for breakfast. Quirky tidbit 2. One surviving carrot seal from 1758 still bears tooth marks where a suspicious hound tried to certify delivery. From here, foot messengers dart off in every direction, one to a radical printer in Norwich, another to a Quaker brokerage in Birmingham, a third to a Shropshire poet who pays in odes. No mileage bands, no penny posts, just boot leather and adrenaline. You jog after the Norwich runner for a spell, marveling that his satchel lies flat against his spine letters, hidden inside its doubled lining. He claims the design by a Huguenot tailor lets him outrun constables and flirt simultaneously. You almost believe him. At a mossy crossroads, you recall the coded pen marks on Boston doorsteps and wonder whether some of these garments carry similar shorthand, one stitch loose for yes, two for danger. Tom confirms with a grin he once dispatched a waistcoat whose missing buttonhole answered an entire business query. The Crown, meanwhile, spent a fortune printing new anti-smuggling proclamations no one read because they were hidden beneath excise stamps, too costly to peel off. Late afternoon brings you to a creek where a barge awaits. The barge woman, a one-time laundry mistress versed in starch and secrets, steers you upriver with the patience of granite. She tells tales of agents who hire fortune-tellers to sniff out contraband. Apparently, tea leaves occasionally predict coat linings. Mainstream fact number 2. The 1784 Commutation Act slashed duties on tea to curb precisely this black market ingenuity. Yet smuggling persisted for letters, since information, unlike tea, cannot be diluted with hot water. Night again. Around a firelit clearing, the day's haul is tallied 43 letters, 7 pamphlets, 1 fold of colonial exchange rates, 2 clandestine marriage certificates, too scandalous for daylight. Coins change hands. Each participant counts silence as part of the profit. You help press the embers flat, recalling the Boston dead letter furnace and thinking how different these flames feel here. Heat safeguards words instead of erasing them. As the camp settles, you lie beneath a blanket stitched naturally with false seams. Owls hoot like low postage horns, reminding you of the tame barn owls once perched over rural cubby holes. Everything circles back: the weighing pans, the penny pillars, the gull-fed blessings, even apron string maps each, an official thread tugged taut by this night's rogue needlework. Sleep drifts close, muffled by wool and conspiracy, and you wonder which message will reach its reader. First your cousin's charred shilling note, or the onion ink secrets sailing pocket size across frontiers. You wake to drum beats that are not owls, not hoofbeats, and definitely not barn owls pecking at carrot wax seals. They're regimental taps rolling across the dawn, like impatient knuckles on a ledger announcing that Britain is now officially again at war. Somewhere a clerk blots his quill, slides a fresh column into the rate tables and labels it "Emergency levy effective immediately." You rub grit from your eyes, recall last night's covert campfire, and realize every hidden seam now carries an extra invisible soldier riding piggyback on its postage. The price hikes begin as whispers. A coachman at the next inn mutters that the General Post Office has slapped a temporary tuppence on all inland letters to fund fortifications. By lunchtime, the whisper is a roar. Tuppence becomes sixpence if the letter crosses a county border, eightpence if it dares approach a coastline. Mainstream fact. During the 7 Years' War, 1756-63, and again in the Napoleonic conflicts, Parliament imposed supplemental surcharges, formerly war taxes, on both domestic and overseas mail, arguing national defense requires national wallets. You watch rates inflate like yeast in a damp pantry, every mile suddenly twice as long, every ounce twice as judgmental. Your companion today is Captain Ledger, so named because his uniform pockets bulge with account books instead of ammunition. He commandeers a creaking mail cart disguised as forage supply reasoning that no brigand will rob cabbages. You climb aboard, wedged between burlap sacks of turnips, and jolt off toward a besieged port city that currently eats messages faster than food. Roads once patrolled by sleepy toll-keepers now swarm with militia, drilling in mud. Their muskets gleam precisely where your purse does not. Captain Ledger flips open his orders, deliver dispatches to the coastal garrison, collect replies, and above all, record extra levy receipts in triplicate. The paper rustles like a restless flock callback to those pigeonhole cubbies and barn owls now moonlighting as nocturnal sentries. Joke one, winks you suggest, stapling coins directly to each sheet to save time. He counters that staples cost extra. Laughter bumps over ruts, rises like steam from the turnips, then dissolves under a sudden squall. Rain hammers canvas till it sounds like distant artillery. The captain curses and yanks a tarpaulin over the precious sack. Somewhere inside, ink smears, figures blur, and patriotism earns a damp mustache. At a wayside booth, newly painted with crossed sword insignia, a revenue officer halts. The cart demands to inspect the mail. He produces a pocket scale smaller than those Boston brass muffins, yet twice as merciless, and weighs 3 random letters for calibration. Each fails. A chalk mark slashes their covers. War due. Umund. You bristle. Your own letter to Aunt Mildred, should it exist, would now cost more than her laudanum habit. Historians still argue whether these roadside spot checks deterred smuggling or merely fattened campaign coffers. Either way, the Crown's broadsword cuts even the thinnest parchment. Miles later, the cart bogs in churned clay drills where artillery wagons passed hours prior. You and the captain shoulder the mail sack, heavy now with imposed destiny, and slog the final furlong to Fort Saltmarsh. Black cannon mouths jut from ramparts, their muzzles dripping rainwater like sulky teapots. Inside the courtyard, sopping soldiers line up for pay, yet receive letters instead, each bearing crimson stamps that shout fees still outstanding. A drummer boy flinches at the sight, whispering he'd rather charge bayonets than balance coins. In the officers' mess, you witness surcharge alchemy firsthand. A junior aide tallies inbound letters, 29 from London, 15 from Dublin, 3 from unnamed admirers who likely regret their timing. He adds a war penny per sheet, then slaps on a rain damage concession equal to half the total concession, meaning, of course, addition. Joke 2 slides in. You ask if the rain at least gets free postage for delivering itself. The aide scribbles a note to propose exactly that. Fort Saltmarsh's Commandant Colonel Paradox, a nickname whispered because his orders rarely match his arithmetic, beckons you to a flickering hearth. He explains that the siege downriver has slowed official couriers, forcing forts to rely on coastal smugglers, yes, perhaps even threadbare Tom's crew, to sneak reports through enemy cordons. Paradox admits paying double war levy for such clandestine service, reasoning that if Parliament taxes honesty, dishonesty must surely charge interest. He produces a small pouch of clinking coins and drops it into the captain's ledger line item, patriotic bribes. While officers trade dispatches, you drift to the rampart and gaze over flooded salt flats. Signal lamps wink across the bay, blinking codes that resemble those cuff-seam dots from Boston Stoops. Quirky tidbit. Wartime relay posts sometimes communicated surcharge updates via lantern flashes. 2 short for increase, 1 long for temporary reprieve, enabling commanders to pocket the difference before the official tables reached town. Somewhere above Barn Owl's circle, likely judging this fiscal aerobics with avian disdain, evening chow arrives hardtack, pounded into a simulacrum of pudding flavored with rum and newsprint ash for fiber. Soldiers swap bites for glimpses at one another's letters, proof that hunger for words rivals that for salt pork. One private unfolds a damp page only to discover the ink has migrated into a Pollock of affectionate blur. Still, he volunteers to pay the full levy because smudged sentiment is better than none. You slip him a candle so he can dry the sheet callback to egg white varnish, and onion juice invisibility wept onto other seas. Night thickens, punctured by occasional cannon flashes beyond the marsh. Captain Ledger loads return letters, each triple-charged, now base rate war tax, and a danger allowance invented earlier by the garrison quartermaster. Mainstream fact number 2. Postal records from 1812 show a single letter from besieged Cadiz to London, costing 3 shillings, about a soldier's weekly pay. Yet correspondence volume from war zones spiked, regardless, illustrating that fear and affection generate their own currency. You volunteer to carry a smaller pouch for speed. The captain nods, cinching its mouth with apron string twine, dyed black for stealth, a familiar tactile memory. Together you pick moonless lanes skirting where enemy patrols might lurk. Mud sucks at your boots, each squelch, sounding like a cashier's drawer snapping shut. Joke 3 stumbles out between breaths you swear the ground is charging a toll based on foot weight. Ledger wheezes that next session of Parliament might consider it. Near dawn, a coastal gale forces refuge under an abandoned toll booth roof. Its striped pole lies, shattered, a casualty of weather or politics. You and the captain huddle among mildew-scented rate tables, flapping in the wind, tallying the day's exorbitant sums. Even damp and exhausted, the arithmetic glows eerie in lantern light war ads. Courage adds casualties and definitely adds coins. Yet somewhere within the pouch nestle letters whose words, ragged or rose-scented, will outlive every levy once peace returns. The thought cushions your eyelids, coaxing them downward. War's surcharges may stretch miles and wallets, but dreams, at least tonight, still travel postage-free. Dawn sneaks through the broken slats of the toll booth roof, pooling in dull puddles as you and Captain Ledger shake off the night's mud taxes. A rooster crows somewhere behind enemy lines, apparently exempt from war surcharges, and Ledger decides the moment is ripe for pay-grade refreshment. He digs into the pouch fishes, out a single envelope stitched with drying raindrops, and taps the corner where an elegant ink flourish replaces the usual crimson fee mark. There, in looping blue, free. Montague. One word, one surname, and suddenly every penny war levy and rain concession evaporates like spilled gin on a hearthstone. You blink, half convinced the captain just performed amateur witchcraft. Instead, he's stumbled upon the aristocracy's favorite coupon, the pot franc. Ledger grunts admiration and slides the pouch back. You hitch your satchel and set out together following a chalky cart track toward the next relay house. Yet all you can think about is that glossy signature, how it vibrated with the confidence of someone who's never juggled tuppence beneath floorboards. Mainstream fact. Since 1660, members of Parliament and certain peers could send letters free of charge merely by scrawling their name and constituency in the top right corner. The post office tallied these gratis flutters of aristocratic quillwork as franked mail and dutifully carried them while billing the National Treasury. Later national meaning, of course, every taxed soul not blessed with hereditary stationery. Mid-morning finds you on the veranda of a stately manor, doubling as a temporary post-stop purled gravel lane columns, stout enough to prop Jupiter and a housekeeper whose lace cap angles like a wind vane. She presents a wicker hamper taller than you, addressed in the same lavish fist. Free. Montague. Contents botanical specimens. Ledger's eyebrows lunge for the stratosphere. Franking, it seems, does not merely apply to dainty love notes. It also encompasses pickled orchids, French cheeses, and, by rumor, one particularly spoiled lapdog who crossed 3 counties asleep in a hatbox. The manor's own groom muscles the hamper onto the coach roof, while whistling a tune suspiciously similar to God Save Our Privileges. Joke 1 slips out. You suggest they might soon frank entire carriages, just add a signature on the axle. The groom laughs, then admits Lord Montague once tried exactly that, with a barrel organ destined for Bath. The postmaster objected only because the instrument wouldn't fit through his office door. A mile on Ledger opens his field ledger appropriately and records the hamper under weight exempt by order of Parliament. You ask how the post office ever recoups such largesse. He taps the page quarterly subsidy. They raise everyone else's rates a halfpenny and call it balancing the scales. You picture those brass pans squealing under phantom parcels while barn owls cackle from overhead rafters. The next relay town buzzes like a beehive dipped in ink. Couriers tumble in sacks bulging with free-signed envelopes that smell faintly of claret and entitlement. A junior clerk at the counter fans them across a desk and sniffs, "Looks like Tuesday." You note that each bears an identical flourish, yet originates from different locales. Bath York even besieged Fort Saltmarsh. Quirky tidbit. Some MPs employed secretaries trained to imitate their master's signature, allowing up to 20 authentically franked letters per day, despite official limits set at 10. Legal gray areas provide the perfect canvas for creative handwriting. A weary innkeeper wanders in, clutching a bundle wrapped in blue silk. He's been told to deliver it onward free naturally, because a duke scrawled his name atop the cloth. Inside the bundle, 6 jars of imported anchovies slosh ominously. Ledger eyes the parcel, then fishes out his personal rulebook liquids, technically require cork and wax seals. The innkeeper pleads ignorance. After all, when a duke's flourished ink says free, who measures brine? Historians still argue whether the Crown purposely ignored such abuses to keep parliamentarians sweet, or whether the post office simply lacked the spine to duel with men who wrote laws for a hobby. By afternoon, you're back on the road with a coach now carrying equal parts franked luxury and war-levied desperation. The juxtaposition feels comedic and acidic all at once. A private soldier's love note has grown too pricey by the yard, yet a viscount's crate of hothouse peaches floats along guilt-free beside it, callback to yeast-inflated rates, now fully proofed and ready for slicing. Joke 2 rises, you wonder aloud if the peaches at least share carriage songs with the soldier's envelope. Ledger says only if they ripen into bards. A sudden downpour forces shelter beneath an oak. You and Ledger munch hardtack crumbs while reading a handbill nailed to the trunk, anonymously printed, "No postage mark, but acid with opinion." End the franking farce. 1 penny for all, or let quills pay their own way. The slogan rings familiar echoes of Rowland Hill's forthcoming penny post agitation. Seeds of reform, you note, sprout best in rainy compost. Ledger pockets the pamphlet, muttering, when slogans fit, in a saddlebag, revolutions ride cheap. Near dusk, you reach a riverside sorting depot housed in a drafty old mill. Lanterns flicker against ancient timbers slick with flour dust. Someone sneezes and a white cloud erupts, ghost-like. Inside franked bundles fill an entire pewter bath, repurposed as an in-tray. Clerks joke that they'll wash the aristocracy's laundry next. One junior lifts a linen-wrapped package heavy as sin initials CW loop across the cloth. He asks whether the free signature covers damages if the bridge upstream collapses. Senior staff shrug. Only the Treasury collapses, lad. Joke 3, you suggest sending the Treasury a bill for emotional stress. Ledger records an accounting footnote to tonight's manifest lists. 40 franked items whose hypothetical postage equals more than your last 3 wage packets. Multiply by Parliament's weekly output, and the bath swiftly overflows both literally and fiscally. Yet the junior clerk still stamps free with near-reverent care. Bureaucracy once ordered obeys like a sleepy mastiff. While lamps hiss lower, you share crusty cheese and recall every earlier scene, the gap-toothed scale clerk. Tom's carrot waxed the war levies that doubled with rain. A pattern emerges like hidden watermark wherever postage pinches. Ingenuity wriggles, but where inked privilege rolls out, hacksaws of protest start to sharpen. Mainstream fact number 2. Petitions against frank abuse surged by the 1830s. One tally claiming 3.3 million free letters left the Treasury short by $300,000 a year, enough to pave a royal highway entirely in disgruntled farthings. Midnight. The mill's wheel groans under trickling river water, lulling you into that familiar drowse where numbers blur into barn owls' wings. Franked crates lie stacked like pampered princes, each awaiting a gravity-fed slide onto carts bound for London's chief office. You trail fingertips across the nearest lid, half expecting peaches to purr. Instead, you feel only cool wood and hotter injustice. The coachman whistles, lantern swung, signaling departure. You climb aboard, thinking of that pamphlet on the Oak One penny for all. Not yet, perhaps, but every flourish of free Montague chisels deeper cracks in the edifice. As wheels crunch over gravel, your eyelids drift the same path downward, heavy and a little indignant. Somewhere behind you, a bath of free mail sloshes. Somewhere ahead, a postmaster will juggle ledgers, and in the quiet between dreams will measure no miles, bear no surcharges, and never, ever require a noble's signature to reach your heart. At first light, you trade the flour dust of the riverside mill for briny air as you and a half-sleeping coachman rattle toward the Cornish coast crates of franked peaches, muttering in wooden sulks behind you. By mid-morning, jagged cliffs rear up, gulls shriek overhead, and the port of Falmouth unfurls below like a dropped canvas masts, stabbing sky yardarms bristling with drying laundry, and the steady clatter of block and tackle beating time against a slate-colored sea. You are here to ride a packet boat, crown-chartered courier of diplomacy bullion, and any letter whose sender could afford the privilege or whose addressee could be bullied into paying double once it docked. The vessel awaiting you, the Swiftshire, looks less like swift assurance and more like a wine cask, sprouting sticks, but the captain swears she once outran a French privateer by jettisoning 50 sacks of salt. Joke 1 creaks loose, you pray he kept at least 1 sack for the cook. A tar-smudged purser ushers you aboard, recording each passenger's name in a docket labeled "To collect on landing." Mainstream fact. Packet ships charge 2 distinct fees, one for the inland leg, to port another equal or higher for the sea crossing itself. Inland francs didn't apply beyond the tide line. Montague's peaches would pay dearly if they fancied continental sunshine. You descend a ladder to inspect the mailroom, a narrow wooden coffin of a space where hemp nets cradle leather pouches stamped Lisbon, Cadiz, and Gibraltar. Condensation purls on every beam. A single stern window admits enough light to illuminate a colony of mold browsing a forgotten hardtack. The purser shoves a hygrometer through the hatch and notes 90% humidity, bad for parchment, worse for wax seals. He shrugs and scatters sawdust infused with pepper to deter weevils. Quirky tidbit. Packet pursers often lace sawdust with chili to repel rats. Occasionally, those same rats acquired a taste for heat and grew into local legends of fire-tongued vermin terrorizing biscuit lockers. On Deck 6, Marines drill with rusty carbines. Privateering is an almost guaranteed cameo in this theater. The Admiralty assigns guards not to protect passengers' necks, but the dispatch is locked in an iron casket bolted beside the mainmast. You run a hand over its rivets, cold-pitted unbreakable, and imagine the diplomatic cipher within worth more than every peach crate and possibly the entire Swiftshire combined. The bosun pipes the anchor away and the ship shudders forward, slicing past Pendennis Castle's guns that nod approval like ancient accountants tallying cannonballs. As land dwindles to a pencil line, swell mounts. The Swiftshire. Bucks pitching your stomach into minor mutiny. Yet you spot the purser measuring distance on a chart with calm knotted string. Each knot equals 1 league, each league another chalk mark on the post office's fee ledger. Historians still argue whether these sea league tables were calculated from straight-line geography or pragmatic zigzags around prevailing winds. Either way, the post office invariably rounded up, never down. Late afternoon brings squalls, wind thrashes, rigging into banshee screams, and spume strafes the deck like an excise man shaking pennies from pockets. The captain orders mail bags brought topside for ventilation. You help haul them lashed 3 together, lest a rogue wave snatch state secrets into Neptune's filing cabinet. Salt spray freckles your coat. Letters inside their oilskin exhale a damp sigh, ink bleeding into abstract cartography. Joke 2 hisses between your chattering teeth. At least war surcharges won't apply if the sea claims every mile. Below, passengers cling to bunks while a steward ladles onion broth. A wealthy wine merchant demands to frank his headaches away, old habit, but the purser politely reminds him Parliament's signature has no jurisdiction beyond the 3-mile limit. Coin clinks, headache lingers. You note the exchange in your mental scrapbook of postal injustices. Mainstream fact number 2. Sea postage could reach 2 shillings per single sheet during wartime, double the inland rate for equivalent mileage, ostensibly hazard pay for waves, but arguably hazard pay for treasury coffers. Night falls. Lanterns swing, sending shadows scudding across deck planks like black crows racing the ship. You volunteer for lookout duty, partly for fresh air, partly because the 'tween decks now smells of vinegar and regret. The horizon flashes a distant lantern, then another. The captain checks his night glass friendly convoy. Still, he commands the Marine sergeant to load muskets and stations him by the mail casket. The unspoken rule, if capture looms, dispatches go overboard weighted with shot rather than enlighten enemy admirals. You finger the tiny seam rip in your sleeve souvenir of threadbare Tom and wonder which travels safer, silk-smuggled intel or this iron-guarded official trove. Just before dawn, the storm breaks like a bad habit. Dawn grease paints the sea pink. Gulls wheel over green rollers. The crew exhales collective tension. In the wardroom, the captain hosts half-shilling hour a ritual, wherein each passenger prepays half the expected landing fee insurance against those who might vanish upon docking. He upends a hat, coins chiming like distant chapel bells. You drop yours with theatrical reluctance, joke 3, perhaps gravity will refuse to carry money the last few inches without surcharge. Gravity obliges anyway. By midday, the Portuguese coast wavers into view. The Swiftsure fires a salute. Fortress cannon answer with indifferent thuds. As you warp into the Tejo estuary, a harbor pilot climbs aboard and immediately slaps a customs chit onto each mail pouch more fees to tally. The purser rolls his eyes and opens the ledger to a section titled Foreign and Unpleasant. He doubles every inland mile inside Portugal for local cart irregularities, then underlines the total twice. It seems the ledger, like the sea, enjoys waves. Dockside chaos ensues. Dockers bellow, goats complain, sailors argue over exchange rates. An official from the British legation strides up in a hat shaped like absolute authority, demands the iron casket, and signs 3 receipts, one for Lisbon, one for London, and a spare to lose en route. Meanwhile, inland letters jostle into a mule cart, whose driver chews garlic with alarming commitment. He will carry them to Coimbra by moonlight, charging another fee because hooves equal hardship. Before disembarking, you glimpse a sodden envelope on the purser's table. Its seal cracked, its address still legible. A note scribbled across, "Sea postage, doubled storm, risk claimed." You shake your head, recalling pepper sawdust parliamentary peaches and Aunt Mildred's endless ledger of woes. No mode of transport escapes creative accounting for long, yet you also feel a flicker of wonder despite storms, pirates, and treasury shortcuts words still crossed oceans in days when a sneeze could sink a fleet. Evening paints Lisbon's rooftops molten gold. You stand on the quay, belongings damp but intact, and watch the Swiftsure prepare for her return voyage, holds restocked with sacks of wine requiring their own inland miles back in England. Somewhere inside, fresh diplomatic pouches already wait under marine bayonets. The sea slaps pilings whispering of round-trip ledgers yet to be written, and your eyelids dip, lulled by brine and bureaucratic rhythm. You realize double charges and damp bravery will soon give way to dry land and drier parliamentary debates. Rowland Hill is clearing his throat somewhere in the distance of time. But for tonight, packet boats still rule the waves, tally marks still sway with the swells, and your dreams like gulls on an updraft ride free of every ledger line. Ale sloshes across a scarred oak table as you duck into the Cat and Cipher, a smoke-thick London tavern, so crammed with pamphleteers that even the sawdust on the floor seems to argue about postage. A fiddler scrapes a tune in the corner, trying and failing to outshout the riot of quills, tankards, and revolutionary whispers. You ease onto a stool beneath a rafter draped in drying packet-boat laundry, and discover tonight's entertainment is a 3-penny debate entitled, "Shall Letters Ever Cost Less Than Ale?" Judging by the foam stains on the speaker's notes, the motion is already half won. At center stage, really just 2 rum barrels pushed together stands Mr. Muddlewick, retired postmaster, waistcoat buttons straining like anxious clerks. He waves a crusty mileage table in one hand and a pewter pot in the other, claiming the post office suffers because people simply don't write enough. From the back, a wiry printer named Polly Quiney heckles that people won't write because each sheet bleeds a supper's worth of coin. She flourishes a pamphlet titled Postal Tyranny: Why We Pay More Than a Packet Rat's Lunch Each. Its edges are still damp from the press ink shining like fresh gossip. You sip small beer and let their shouting swirl around you. Mainstream fact: In 1837, schoolmaster Rowland Hill published Post Office Reform, Its Importance and Practicability, arguing that a uniform one-penny rate prepaid by adhesive stamp would increase volume enough to offset lower fees. Hill isn't present tonight, but his ghostly diagrams haunt every ale-splattered sheet passed hand to hand. A coal porter squints at one, tracing the curve showing correspondence volume, skyrocketing the moment price drops. He burps approval economic literacy via carbonation. A chimney sweep slams down his mug and bellows, "Why prepay? Let the crown chase me for coppers if it dares." Laughter rattles pewter, yet Polly fires back that prepayment means no doorstep shakedowns, no dead letter bonfires, and certainly fewer bruised carriers pocketing disputed pennies. She slaps a sheet of gummed paper onto the Barrel Hills prototype stamp, then dares the crowd to lick progress. Joke one bubbles up inside you. You whisper, "The post office may charge extra for saliva if this trend continues." The sweep cackles hard enough to shed soot like celebratory confetti. Near the hearth sits old Captain Ledger, warming war-sore knees and counting the day's franked peaches with exaggerated sighs. You tap his shoulder, pointing toward the debate. He grunts that cheap postage would bankrupt every ledger he's ever loved, then admits softer that it might also spare privates the agony of triple-levy love notes. Contradictions pile faster than pipe ash. At a side table, 3 apprentices assemble mock parcels, testing how Hill's penny stamp might look on everything from perfumed billets doux to packages of fish hooks. One lad reveals a scrap of gutta percha, imported miracle rubber coated in sticky resin, that he claims could serve as a reusable stamp. Quirky tidbit. Experimental returnable stamps briefly surfaced in 1840 prototypes before officials realized thrifty Victorians would recycle them until the glue gave up not their wallets. You imagine Aunt Mildred gently laundering stamps between handkerchiefs, joke 2 floats lemon-scented through your mind. Back on the barrels, Mr. Muddlewick argues lower rates would flood the system with trivialities, cat updates, bad poetry, invitations to sneeze and reply. Polly riposts that trivialities are exactly what keep families tethered across grim chimney stacks. Besides, the Treasury could use the extra volume to justify modern sorting machines, clever devices of belts and brass fingers rumored to shuffle letters faster than over-caffeinated clerks. Historians still argue whether Hill's real aim was humanitarian efficiency or a financial rescue mission for a post office, bleeding free francs and war debts. Whichever truth you favor, the cat and cipher debates both with equal foam. A scrawny radical in a cravat patched with a newsprint leaps up brandishing a placard. Franking feeds the peaches of privilege. The tavern howls. Someone throws a stale crust that splinters on a beam, raining crumbs onto your ale. You lick one crumb, tastes like marginal tax resentment. The radical proposes a dramatic stunt mail, a single gigantic sheet, signed by every commoner, folded so cleverly it counts as one item, yet voices a million pleas for reform. Joke 3 pops aloud before you can rein it in, and you suggest addressing it to His Majesty, care of Sticker Shock. Even Muddlewick chuckles ale sloshing over actuarial despair. Between rounds, pamphlets flutter across the room faster than barn owls once skimmed rural cubbies. You skim one essay describing perforation lines that would let stamps tear neatly from sheets, a nod to tailoring's pinking shears. Another leaflet sketches pillar boxes sprouting on every street, painted a cheery red so night couriers won't miss them even after 4 pints. Quirky tidbit 2. The first British pillar boxes installed on Jersey Island in 1852 were actually green. They turned red only after too many locals walked into them at dusk, proving color choice can be a public safety expense. A bell rings for last orders. Landlord Old Ned himself, a former mail coach guard who still sports powder burns on his waistcoat, claps for silence. He proposes an unofficial vote, raise your tankard if you'd risk a penny for unlimited miles. The forest of mugs is instant and unanimous, except Muddlewick's, which hesitates, then lifts halfway, as he mutters about scientific trial periods. You suspect his arm weighs the same as those brass muffin weights, but pride finally hoists it. Debate over the crowd spills onto cobbles, slick with spilled porter. Posters for Hill's upcoming lecture flap on neighboring walls, promising demonstrations of envelope folding that could mesmerize even a bored vicar's cat. Captain Ledger shakes your hand, admits reform looks inevitable, and wonders aloud whether ledgers themselves might one day be franked by machines. You assure him barn owls will still need somewhere to perch. He smiles, half-comforted. Fog drifts in from the Thames, muffling hoofbeats and the distant clank of packet-boat masts. You tug your cloak tight, feeling inside pocket seams, just in case threadbare Tom tucked another secret there. For once, their empty progress requires fewer hidden stitches and more public glue. Somewhere far ahead, adhesive stamps, bright pillar boxes, and uniform pennies wait like fresh dawn, though their light hasn't yet reached this smoky alley. You head home through streets humming with conspiratorial optimism. A lamplighter tips his hat, probably thrilled he won't have to carry unpaid bills for aristocratic peaches much longer. You answer with a nod heavy as twilight, but warmed by a thought the arithmetic of empathy may finally outrun the mileage bands. And as your boots echo toward bed, you sense tonight's arguments folding themselves into dreams, prepaid, frictionless, and ready to post straight to the quiet center of your subconscious. Dawn barely stains the Thames when you squeeze through the iron gates of Somerset House and into the echoing corridors where the post office bureaucracy keeps its stiffer collars. Yesterday's tavern uproar followed you here in the form of ink-splattered pamphlets stuffed into every doorknob, each boldly proclaiming, "1 penny anywhere." Clerks try to peel them off like stubborn postage wafers, but the glue equal parts, flour paste, and righteous conviction clings harder than a barn owl talon on a mouse. You have an appointment in a windowless committee room whose atmosphere feels pickled in quills. A half-circle of gray-headed officials clutches mileage tables as though they were rosaries. At the center sits Roland Hill himself, tall, keen-eyed jacket pockets bulging with folded diagrams. His voice, soft yet certain, cuts through the paper rustle like a sharp letter knife. "Gentlemen, we must think of volume, not distance." He flips a placard showing postage income as a teeter-totter higher rate, lower letters. Lower rate letters skyrocket until the graph looks like a crooked church steeple. You spot Captain Ledger's penciled annotation in the margin. Peaches panic. Hill presents a small rectangle of black printed Britannia, crown still damp from yesterday's press run. The room inhales. An adhesive receipt he explains to be licked and affixed in prepayment. No doorstep quarrels, no brass scales at counters, no barn owl over time. Mainstream fact. That prototype will morph into the world's first postage stamp, the penny black issued in May 1840, a sheet of 240 tiny Queen Victorias ready to revolutionize envelope real estate. Mr. Sykes, senior mileage champion, harumphs that this scheme will invite an avalanche of idle correspondence, valentines, gossip, grocery lists. Hill counters with a ledger predicting profits from 5-fold mail volume. He notes that France's uniform 8-centime post already proves the arithmetic. Sykes grumbles something about French wine poisoning judgment. Joke 1 trickles across the polished table, you suggest. If Valentines truly multiply, the crown could tax kisses. An undersecretary actually scribbles the idea before catching himself. Hill clicks a brass slide rule callback to those apron string knots demonstrating how even the remotest Scottish crofter will send letters once price no longer bites like midges. A side clerk raises the ghost of war levies. Could uniform pennies survive the next European squabble? Hill nods, concedes uncertainties, but proposes that peace is cheaper to post than war ever was to surcharge. Historians still argue whether Hill's reform was driven more by philanthropic zeal or a shrewd bid to rescue a deficit bleeding department. Whichever shade you choose, the penny stamp will soon bear the weight of both motives. Meeting adjourns for tea, a liquid that once inspired smugglers, now perfuming parliamentary saucers. You drift to the alcove where Hill's samples rest, penny blacks, 2 penny blues, and a curious design on stout ivory paper. William Mulready's allegorical envelope, cherubs hauling mail continents wide. Quirky tidbit. Early testers doodled mustaches on Mulready's cherubs in protest, preferring plain stamps to artistic propaganda. Within months, officials scrapped the envelope and ordered simpler designs proving art criticism can be delivered postage paid. Outside, Charing Cross swells with lunchtime traffic. Mobile letter writers, enterprising scribes with collapsible desks, offer to compose notes for a penny, plus halfpenny tip. You hire one to dash a trial letter to Aunt Mildred, careful to mention her laudanum, but promise cheaper updates henceforth. He folds Licks, a prototype stamp, presses it with a borrowed cork. No wax, no waiting for crimson handprints, and your note vanishes into a shiny new pillar box, freshly painted not green or red, but experimental canary yellow so surveyors can track public reaction. Joke 2, you muse that soon every street might look like an aviary for metal birds. An hour later, you loiter at the Westminster sorting office, revamped with contraptions, endless canvas belts, brass claws, and a revolving drum that slings stamped letters into bins marked North, South, Uncertain, and Aunt Mildredish. Clerks possess sly humor. A foreman boasts the machinery will sort 30,000 items nightly, 10 times the old hand rate provided. No stray franked peach explodes mid-shoot. You recall flour dust mills, packet holds, and those sawdust chills. Automation seems cleaner, though no less noisy. Evening drapes the Abbey towers when Hill's figures reach the House of Commons. You squeeze into the public gallery as MPs wave franked bundles like tarnished trophies. One member claims a penny will bankrupt coach contractors. Another exclaims that his own stable hands can pivot to hauling crates instead of costly correspondence. A junior member from York, perhaps descendant of that gap-toothed clerk, reads testimonials from farmers eager to send livestock advice before hooves spoil. Parliament's chandeliers sway gently, as if nodding to the rhythm of progress. Debate runs past supper. Somewhere beneath the benches you imagine threadbare Tom, preparing celebratory seams with Franks, doomed his smuggled sideline may finally retire. Yet you also envision barn owls blinking at emptier rafters, a whimsical loss. Captain Ledger, seated among lobbyists, flips his battered ledger to a fresh page penciling potential savings in ink, the color of cautious hope. Near midnight, the speaker calls the vote. Cheeks flush, papers rustle, and quills tally. The motion passes narrowly, gloriously, a uniform penny, prepaid by stamp. Gas lights hiss. Someone pops a cork. The gallery erupts in a whispery cheer, polite enough for Westminster. Joke 3 unfurls from your grin. You predict Treasury coffers will soon install earplugs against the avalanche of copper coins. You step into cool night, guided by newly installed street lamps, glinting off slick cobbles. Newsboys already hawk broadsheets. Postal Revolution approved lick and stick. Future begins. You purchase one for a halfpenny, cheaper than yesterday's gossip tax, and fold it carefully beside your last expensive mileage receipt. Two eras colliding in your pocket like brass weights meeting feather. Fog creeps off the river, but tonight it feels less oppressive, as though carrying lighter parcels of dreams. Somewhere presses churn, penny black's pillar boxes wait for varnish, and a million unwritten trivialities queue inside people's throats ready to burst into ink because they finally can. You head home past dozing watchmen, each heartbeat, measuring out tuppence, saved threepence, dodge countless feelings, soon affordable. In your lodging, you light a stub of tallow, unfold your notebook, and begin drafting tomorrow's letter, purely for pleasure. No war levies, no franking petitions, no seam-ripped intrigue, just ordinary thoughts about the taste of victory, tinged air, and the faint cedar scent of freshly printed stamps. Sleep hovers gentle as a barn owl on quieter duty, and you suspect your dreams tonight will carry very little postage indeed. You rise early on the 6th of May, 1840, the first morning. Stamps actually mean something more dignified than sealing wax stains and aristocratic flourishes. The city hums like a hive, tasting its own honey for the first time. You join the queue outside St. Martin's-le-Grand, where clerks hand out sheets of glossy midnight rectangles, each tiny Queen Victoria, staring forward, chin lifted as though daring anyone to doubt a one-penny promise. The gum on the back smells faintly of vanilla. You lick a corner, half expecting confection, and joke one to the stranger behind you that postal reform has finally invented breakfast. He laughs, then sticks the stamp to his lapel like a patriotic brooch. Inside the grand hall, rows of trestle tables groan beneath brick-sized bundles of penny blacks and their stately two-penny blue cousins. Mainstream fact. One sheet bears 240 stamps, every position uniquely lettered so London accountants can trace forgeries. Clerks slice them with penknives, muttering serial codes, the way monks once intoned psalms. A burly porter carts away bundles toward distant provinces, leaving a trail of gum flakes, glittering on marble like budget snow. You purchase your first dozen stamps, 12 pence for the cost of a single York letter, 10 years ago, and feel a heady rush normally reserved for illicit gingerbread. At a side desk, a post office demonstrator coaches customers in proper moistening. No dribbles, no dunking, just a polite kiss. He brandishes blotting paper to dab excess spit, then wields a stamper soaked in crimson ink. The device crashes down, imprinting a whirled Maltese cross over Victoria's serene face. Cancellation complete. The used stamp is officially spent. A child in the crowd groans. Joke 2 whispers that toddlers everywhere have just lost the world's stickiest playing cards. Armed with envelope quill and your new adhesives, you settle at a public writing bench. The atmosphere crackles with papery adrenaline. Seamstresses scribble dress patterns to country cousins, dock workers dash cheeky ballads to sweethearts upriver, and one solemn fellow tries unsuccessfully to stuff an entire solicitor's contract into a wafer-thin wrapper simply because it only costs a penny, sir. You address Aunt Mildred once more, this time adding a flourish. Paid in advance, no fee at your door. Please don't faint. You lick stick dab and watch the clerks stamper brand your handiwork with bureaucratic finality. Past the counter, new sorting machinery rattles like a clockwork carnival. Canvas belts shuffle the freshly stamped letters beneath rows of spring-loaded paddles that flip each item face up so inspectors can spot missing cancellations. Historians still argue whether This paddling contraption improved throughput, or merely mesmerized visitors into thinking so. Either way, it clacks with energetic optimism. Letters tumble into pigeonholes marked not by mileage but by destination, initials B for Birmingham, IJ for Ipswich, Jersey, and so on. You note with glee that no column tracks their weight. Complex maths has been boiled down to 1 square inch of gummed certainty. Outside pillar boxes glint canary yellow under reluctant sunlight. Delivery boys cluster around them debating routes now free of doorstep toll wrangling. One lad claims he ran 5 extra streets today just for the sporting of it. Quirky tidbit, within a week, some mischievous Londoners discover that damp steam loosens stamps off envelopes. Reuse seems temptingly inevitable until clerks switch cancellation ink from washable carmine to tenacious black. You glimpse a street urchin testing steam from a tea kettle, only to watch the stamp tear progress punishes thrift yet again. An elderly coachman sidles up thumb, smoothing his gray mustache. Revenues from mail coaches, he laments, will dwindle, now that every scrap of gossip no longer waits to bulk itself into profitable packets. Still, he brightens, predicting passenger demand may rise. It's hard to lick a stamp onto a hug, after all. Joke 3 surfaces, you reassure him barn owls might pivot to delivering parcels, provided they master gum application without gluing their beaks shut. By afternoon, the public counter resembles a festival stall. Merchants hawk decorative stamp albums, blank grids, promising order to tomorrow's avalanche of adhesives. 2 schoolboys trade duplicates as if marbles. One boasts possession of AA1, the sheet's top left position, already a collector's trophy. Quirky tidbit 2. A week later, enterprising drapers will stitch unused sheets inside corset linings, smuggling them abroad where foreign philatelists pay premiums. The scandal forces customs officers to add corset flattening to their unexpectedly varied duties. You roam to Clerkenwell, where a once furtive smuggler's tavern now hosts an impromptu wake for franking. Threadbare, Tom lifts a mug, mock eulogizes seams and carrot wax, then shrugs. Needles still sew, but glue saves time. Captain Ledger scribbles new ledger columns labeled Stamps Sold and Complaints Reduced. Even the gap-toothed York clerk has sent a telegram praising life without muffin weights, though he does miss the owls. Callbacks swirl like confetti in ale foam. Evening settles. Lamplighters spark a chain of yellow fire along the Strand. You drop your stamped letter into a pillar box, listening for the soft plunk, the sound of distance, surrendering to glue. Tomorrow, Aunt Mildred will break the seal without breaking her budget, and somewhere between your pen and her bedside, no one will pause to argue weight, mileage, or war. The penny promise is small, sticky, and luminously certain. On the walk home, you note freshly pasted posters announcing 2 penny postcards coming soon. Proof innovation breeds offspring before the ink dries. You imagine future decades sprouting colored commemoratives, pictorials, and maybe even self-adhesive marvels that need no lick at all. For tonight, though, the streets smell of gum arabic and coal smoke, and your pockets rustle with unused stamps begging adventures. Dreams drift close, gummed gently to the corners of your eyelids, ready to carry you anywhere, no surcharge applied. Back in your modest parlor, on the last frosty evening of the year, you drag the oak account chest from beneath the bed. Its hinges squeal like old coach wheels, releasing a blizzard of invoices, folded notes, club circulars, Aunt Mildred's weekly health sonnets, and one mysterious valentine that still smells of tangerines and bravado. You promised yourself you'd tot up every penny. Now that distance rides free, so you spread the papers across the table, light 2 stubby candles, and brace your quill like a bayonet against chaos. First, you sort the pre-reform relics, those lead-weighted letters that demanded shillings just to say thanks for the socks. Brass muffin weights may be gone, yet your purse still remembers their pinch. You stack each by mileage band, 15-mile 3p, 30-mile 4p, all the way to the ruinous shilling zone. Totals ascend like ladder rungs toward bankruptcy. Mainstream fact. Post office ledgers show that in 1839, a single Liverpool to London business correspondence could swallow 2 full days' factory wages. No wonder merchants wrote as sparingly as monks on rationed vellum. Next come the bright-eyed penny-black descendants, corners dog-eared from enthusiastic peeling. You whistle softly as identical figures line your notebook column 1D, 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 tiny beats in a brand new metronome. A grin ambushes you. Joke one slips out that Queen Victoria surely never imagined becoming a repetitive budget item. You total the column 12 shillings for an entire year of chatty updates, market quotes, and one ill-advised limerick about barn owls. The old system would have charged 17 shillings for just the first month. Between the piles, you discover an envelope bordered in black mourning stationery from Cousin Edgar. Its thick crepe edge bumps the scale half an ounce up, and your costs with it. Quirky tidbit. Victorian etiquette demanded these heavy borders announce grief at a glance, but postal clerks loathed them. One even petitioned for a sorrow surcharge so the bereaved would at least pay extra for the weight. You tuck the letter under necessary extravagances and jot 2 pennies beside it, trying not to laugh at grief's bookkeeping. Hours pass. Candle stubs surrender. Wax drips on your sums like frozen tears. You pause to rub your eyes. Historians still argue whether the penny post directly sparked rural literacy or whether rising school attendance did the real lifting, but your figures tell a simpler story. When words get cheaper, people risk writing them. Mildred's 78 letters prove it each a bloom on the family tree watered with gum Arabic. You reach the smuggled years bundle, coat seam slivers and onion ink ghosts from threadbare Tom's heyday. They cost nothing at the time, yet your conscience adds a sly line item labeled Guilt Unbillable. Joke 2, you debate charging yourself back interest, but decide the Crown already collects enough emotional tax. Near midnight, you tally the war surcharge relics, red-inked and rain-blotched. Even writing down the figures makes your quill feel heavier. War may be glorious on statues you muse, but it bankrupts envelopes quicker than trumpets sound. You double underline the total in grim ink and allow yourself one muttered oath, PG-13 naturally. Finally, you add every column, pre-reform, war-levied, franc forgiven, seam-smuggled, penny-stamped, mourning-weighted. The numbers converge beneath your quill like geese settling on a winter pond. You lean back, eyelids fluttering, and glimpse the ledger's final truth. This year's correspondence double. Last year, in sheer sheet count, cost barely a third of the old outlay. The penny revolution hasn't merely trimmed expenses. It has blown a hole clean through the wall between hearts. Joke 3 yawns out as you imagine future scholars pronouncing economies of scale while ignoring that most of those scales now gather dust beside barn owl roosts. You cap the ink douse the candles and let the silence swell until even figures seem to hush. Let the candle glow fade its last amber flecks dissolving into the velvet dark as you ease back in your chair. The ledger rests closed beneath your fingertips, no longer a clatter of columns, but a quiet, satisfying weight, almost warm from memory. Outside, the city's wheels murmur along rain-washed streets, yet from here the noise reaches you only as a distant lullaby, steady, measured, reassuring. Picture the letters you counted now, drifting like gentle moths through miles of moonlit corridors, their envelopes soft as folded snow. Each one knows its path along iron rails that hum beneath sleeping villages, across calm rivers glimmering under frost, through lamplit sorting halls, where yawning clerks move slowly so as not to disturb the hush. Somewhere a pillar box door clicks shut, and the sound is no sharper than a heartbeat settling into rest. Breathe in, feel chest and shoulders loosen, as if every coin you once feared to spend has lifted off your ribs. Exhale, and imagine that breath carrying the last leftover figures into the night sky, where they fade among stars, numbers, turned to harmless specks of silver. There are no scales here, no war levies, no hurried hoofbeats on muddy roads, only the gentle certainty that words you care about can travel easily, now floated onward by a single quiet penny, and the calm trust of an unbroken seal. Let your thoughts slow to the rhythm of distant sorting belts. Soft thrum, soft, silent, soft thrum, and allow sleep to stamp its own invisible mark upon your drifting mind. The journey is finished, the cost accounted for, and the story, like a well-delivered letter, has reached its restful address.